Welcome to the next chapter. It is classification 2. Now, the concept of classification was introduced in level 1 of video books. Now, in level 1, we learned about the necessities of classification, and the need for the 5 kingdoms of living organisms was stressed. In this chapter, we will learn more about the general characteristics of each of the 5 kingdoms and the main characteristics of some selected phyla or division and classes where necessary. Now, classification is placing of living organisms in specialized groups based on their similarities and differences in structure and origin that might indicate a common biological relationship. Although all living organisms share certain characteristics, they certainly differ in very many ways. It is therefore necessary to classify these organisms so that those that have common features can be grouped together and those that have different features can also be grouped separately. The study of grouping of organisms according to their relationships is called taxonomy. Now, modern classification is mainly based on the structural similarities and differences. Closely related organisms which share common features and evolutionary history are often placed in the same group, while those with more distantly related features are placed in different groups. Based on these similarities and differences, organisms are grouped in 7 major taxonomic units that we call taxa. These include kingdom, phylum or phyla in plural, and it is called division in plants. We then have class, order, family, genus, and species. The kingdom is of course the first and the largest rank, and species is the last and the smallest. In this hierarchy, the similarities increase from the higher rank to the lower rank. On the other hand, the differences decrease. Organisms that resemble in nearly all respects belong to the same species. A species is therefore defined as a group of organisms that can freely and naturally interbreed to give rise to a fertile or viable offspring. For example, goats interbreed to produce goats because they belong to the same species, and the same thing happens to humans. But in certain cases, however, members of different species may interbreed and give rise to an offspring. However, the offspring is sterile. A horse and a donkey are such examples where they interbreed to give rise to a mule, but the mule is a sterile animal. On the other hand, all human beings are Homo sapiens and belong to the same species, that is, sapiens. They therefore interbreed to give rise to a fertile offspring. The differences in skin color or the facial structures only place human beings in different races. The same phenomenon is also observed in cattle, dogs, and beans. In animals except humans, the term breed is used, while in plants, the term variety is preferred. Now, a Swedish scientist by the name Carolus Linnaeus pioneered the work of classification. He pioneered the universal system of classification, which had 2 names and concise descriptions of organisms, and he introduced binomial nomenclature, a system which involves giving 2 names to an organism. In this system, individual species bear both the genus and the species names. An organism therefore has 2 names. For example, human beings are identified as Homo sapiens. Homo is the generic name and sapiens is the specific name. Now, there are rules that are employed in binomial nomenclature include the following. 1. The generic name is written first, followed by the specific name. The first letter in the generic name must always be capital and the rest are small letters. The specific name is written in small letters. The 2 names are underlined when typed or handwritten. The names are italicized when printed. This indicates that the names are scientific. For example, the golden black jackal is identified as Canis aureus. The dog is identified as Canis familiaris. The leopard is called Panthera pardus, and the lion is called the Panthera leo. The weed blackjack is called the Bidens pilosa, and the bang is identified as Cannabis sativa. Now, looking at these names, it is clear that The dog and the black jackal belong to the same genus but different species, and the same case follows for the leopard and the lion. Next, we look at the 5 kingdoms of classification. Now, Carolus Linnaeus created his taxa in the 18th century, basing his system on the knowledge that was available at that time. As more and more information was gathered over the years, the classification by Linnaeus was not sufficient to logically include all organisms. Many new forms of life have been discovered, and there have been changes in ideas about those characteristics used in classifying organisms. For example, is Chlamydomonas an animal or a plant? It possesses a chloroplast, which is a plant characteristic, and a flagella, which is a feature associated with animals. Therefore, the most generally accepted classification system now contains 5 kingdoms, and these include Kingdom Monera, Protoctista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Kingdom Monera. The Kingdom Monera comprises mainly of bacteria, for example, the Vibrio cholerae, Nitrobacter, E. coli, Azotobacter, Nitrosomonas, and many others. The general characteristics of Kingdom Monera include: the organisms are unicellular and microscopic. Some are single cells while others are colonial. They also have varied body shapes. The nuclear material is not enclosed within a nuclear membrane, and they are said to be prokaryotic. They have a cell wall but is not made up of cellulose, it is made up of a substance called peptidoglycan. They have very few organelles which are not membrane bound. The mitochondria is absent in Monera. Most of them are heterotrophic, feeding saprophytically or parasitically, but some are autotrophic. Organisms in the Kingdom Monera reproduce mostly by asexual means through binary fission. Most of them are anaerobes, but some respire aerobically. Finally, most of them move by use of flagella. Now, the clustering of different types of bacteria is shown on your screen. We have the Streptococcus, we have Staphylococcus, and we also have Diplococcus. Kingdom Protoctista. Now, the Kingdom Protoctista include amoeba, Paramecium, Plasmodium, Trypanosomes, Chlamydomonas, Euglena, and the Spirogyra. The general characteristics include the following. These are organisms with varied body forms. Some are microscopic unicellular or colonial, while others are multicellular thalloid. Their nuclei are membrane bound, and hence they are said to be eukaryotic. They have many organelles, including mitochondria, which are membrane bound. Some are heterotrophic, while others are autotrophic. Reproduction in Kingdom Protoctista is mainly asexual by binary fission, fragmentation, or sporulation. However, under special conditions, some reproduce sexually by conjugation. Most Protoctista are mobile, moving by means of pseudopodia, cilia, or flagella. Some are, however, sessile. Some of them may have specialized structures that perform specific functions, for example, a contractile vacuole for osmoregulation. On your screen are examples of organisms in the Kingdom Protoctista. We have the Chlamydomonas, the amoeba, Paramecium, and the Spirogyra. Kingdom Fungi. Now, the fungi include well-known saprophytes like the yeast, Penicillia, bread molds, toadstools, and the mushroom. The parasitic ones cause animal and plant diseases such as ringworms, athlete's foot, wheat rust, potato and tomato blight. The general characteristics of kingdom fungi. The fungi are eukaryotic organisms. The simplest are unicellular yeast, while others are multicellular organisms like the molds, toadstool, and the mushroom. The basic unit is the hypha, which consists of a cell wall enclosing cytoplasm containing numerous nuclei. The hyphae appear as filaments, collectively making up a structure called mycelium. Most fungi have cell walls containing chitin, while a few have their cell walls made of cellulose. Fungi have neither chloroplast nor chlorophyll. They feed on already manufactured food. They send hyphal threads into the food materials, and these special hyphae are referred to as rhizoids in saprophytic types and hausteria in parasitic types. The fungi reproduce both asexually and sexually. Asexual reproduction is by spores or budding, as in yeast, whereas sexual reproduction involves the fusion of nuclei in the hyphal branches. Now, examples of fungi include the yeast. We have them on your screen. We also have the rhizopus, and we have the edible mushroom. Next is kingdom plantae. Now, the general characteristics of the kingdom plantae include they are eukaryotic and multicellular. In most of them, the body is differentiated into leaves, stems, and the roots. Their cells have cellulose cell walls. Majority have a transport system. They have photosynthetic pigment, and they are therefore autotrophic. Reproduction is both asexual and sexual. They also show alternation of generations. The kingdom plantae is divided into three main divisions, namely Bryophyta, Pteridophyta, and Spermatophyta. Division Bryophyta. Now, the division Bryophyta include mosses and liverworts. They have the following characteristics. They are thyloid, as in liverworts, or differentiated into simple leaf-like and stem-like structures like in mosses. They lack a vascular transport system. They contain chlorophyll and hence are photosynthetic. They have developed rhizoids for anchoring and absorbing water together with dissolved mineral salts. Now on your screen we have the funaria, that is the moss plant, and the liverwort. They also show alternation of generations. The gamete-producing gametophyte is the persistent plant. The spore-producing sporophyte is born on the gametophyte on which it is dependent. The male gametes are produced by Antheridia and the female gametes are produced by the Archegonia. Fertilization depends on the availability of water. Finally, they are terrestrial, growing on damp substratum like rocks, walls, and marshes. The next division is Pteridophyta, and these include the ferns and the hostels. The Pteridophyta show a wide variety from small types to giant trees, ferns of more than 10 meters tall. They show a greater ability to inhabit land than the Bryophyta. General characteristics of the Pteridophyta: they have roots, stems, and leaves, but no flowers. The leaves are compound with leaflets known as pinna. They possess clearly defined vascular system, having xylem and the phloem. They possess chlorophyll and are therefore photosynthetic. They show alternation of generations, where the sporophyte, normally referred to as the fern plant, is the dominant one, while the gametophyte is an independent, minute, heart-shaped structure called the prothallus. On the lower side of mature leaves are borne spore-bearing structures called sporangia, which exist in groups known as sori or in singular soras. They show clearly defined sexual reproduction, and fertilization is independent of water. On your screen we have the sporophyte and the gametophyte of the fern plant. The third division is Spermatophyta, and this division comprises all the seed-bearing plants. They are the familiar green plants which produce seeds through the flowers or cones. The following are the general characteristics of the seed-bearing plants from the division Spermatophyta. The plant body is differentiated into roots, stems, leaves, and seed-bearing structures. The vascular system is highly developed with xylem tissues containing both the xylem and the tracheids. Sexual reproduction is well defined. Fertilization is preceded by growth of pollen tube and does not depend on water like in other groups. Seeds are produced after fertilization. They have alternation of generations where the sporophyte is the dominant generation and the gametophyte is greatly reduced and enclosed within the sporophyte. They also contain chlorophyll and hence are photosynthetic. Now, this division Spermatophyta consists of two main subdivisions, the Gymnospermaphyta and the Angiospermaphyta. The subdivision Gymnospermaphyta. The general characteristics of plants in this subdivision include the following. They bear cones of two types, male and the female cones as shown on your screen. After fertilization, the seeds are borne on the female cone and the seeds are not enclosed in a fruit wall. They are therefore called naked seeds. They show some xerophytic characteristics such as rolled leaves, needle-shaped leaves, and sunken stomata, as well as thick and waxy cuticles. Xylem consists of mainly tracheids, while the phloem does not have the companion cells. This subdivision has three main classes, namely the coniferals, cycadales, and the ginkgos. The class coniferals. These include all the common gymnosperms. Coniferous trees are naturally found in areas of little water. They have small needle-like leaves with a waxy cuticle. Conifers can be recognized by the presence of cones, and most of them are evergreen. In the pinus tree, the male cones are usually small and form clusters around the base of the terminal bud. Female cones, on the other hand, appear on lateral buds on young shoots. Mature naked seeds occur at the base of the female cone some months after pollination. Next is class cycadales, and cycadales resemble the palms superficially. They have long compound leaves which are clustered at the apex of the thick, usually short and unbranched stems. They have cones which are borne at the apex of the trunk among the leaves. The last class is the ginkgos, and members of this class are very rare. The only surviving examples are the gink biloba species, whose native land of origin is China. They are deciduous with fan-like leaves. Subdivision Angiospermaphyta. Now, this is the most advanced group of plants found everywhere in the world. They include grasses, herbs, shrubs, and trees. The following are the general characteristics of the Angiospermaphyta. They are flower-bearing and are usually bisexual. The seeds are enclosed in an ovary which develops into a fruit. Xylem has tracheids and vessels, while phloem has companion cells. They also exhibit double fertilization. Now, this group is divided into two distinct classes, namely the dicotyledonei and monocotyledonei. The name angiosperms in itself means seeds within a vessel. Angiosperms carry their female gametes or ovules within the ovaries of the flowers. Upon fertilization, flowers wilt and the ovaries become the fleshy fruit. But not all have bright flowers. Many have tiny flowers. The division Angiospermophyta is divided into classes Monocotyledonei and Dicotyledonei. The monocots and the dicot exhibit certain structural differences. The monocot seeds have one cotyledon, while the dicot seeds have two cotyledons. Upon germination, the monocot seed remains in the ground, and this is called hypogyle germination. The cotyledons of a dicot are carried from the ground, and this is called epigyle germination. Monocot leaves have parallel venation, while dicots have branched or net venation. Another difference is in their root systems. Monocots have a fibrous root system, while the dicots have a taproot system. The other difference lies in the arrangement of the vascular bundles in the stem. The vascular bundles of a monocot stem are scattered throughout the ground parenchyma of the stem. Herbaceous dicot stems have vascular bundles arranged in form of a ring. The table on your screen shows some of the differences between the monocots and the dicots. Next is Kingdom Animalia, and the members of the Kingdom Animalia have the following general features. They are eukaryotic and multicellular. Their cells have no cell walls, only the plasma membrane. All of them are heterotrophic. They feed on ready manufactured food. Most reproduce sexually, while a few reproduce asexually. Most show locomotion, but few are still sessile. The Kingdom Animalia comprises up to 9 phyla, but in this video we shall only look at 2 phyla, that is the phylum Arthropoda and the Chordata. Phylum Arthropoda. Now, members of the phylum Arthropoda have the following main characteristics. The members of this phylum have jointed appendages and hence the name Arthropoda. They possess many paired appendages which are specialized for various functions. The body is covered with a hardened exoskeleton which is made up of chitin. The exoskeleton provides surfaces for muscle attachment. It is shed off at intervals to allow for increase in size, a condition referred to as molting. They have segmented bodies. The body of most of them is divided into head, thorax, and abdomen. In some, the head and the thorax are fused to form what is called a cephalothorax. The head, thorax, and abdomen are segmented. Members of the phylum Arthropoda are bilaterally symmetrical. They have an open circulatory system where the blood flows into open cavities like the hemocoel. They have a tubular dorsal heart. The head is well developed, having eyes, sensory structures, and a fairly well developed brain. Gaseous exchange in arthropods is through tracheal system, which opens through spiracles to the outside. Some aquatic forms use gills for gaseous exchange. Reproduction in arthropods is mainly sexual with internal fertilization. The sexes are separate. The phylum Arthropoda is divided into 5 main classes, that is Crustacea, Chilopoda, Diplopoda, Arachnida, and Insecta, based on the following. the number of limbs, presence and number of antennae, and also the number of body parts. Class Crustacea. Examples of members in this class include the Daphnia, crayfish, crab, and prawn. They have the following general features. The head and the thorax are fused to form a cephalothorax, which is often protected by a carapace. They have 2 pairs of antennae. They have between 5 and 20 pairs of limbs, which are modified for various functions. These functions include locomotion, feeding, and defense. The limbs are on the cephalothorax and the abdomen. Crustaceans have a pair of compound eyes, 3 pairs of mouth parts consisting of 1 pair of mandibles and 2 pairs of maxillae. Gaseous exchange in crustaceans is by gills. Now, most crustaceans are marine, but some live in fresh water. A few are found in moist places on land. Aquatic forms inhabit the shores, aquatic surfaces, around water plants, and in the open waters. Most crustaceans are free-living, but a few barnacles are parasitic. Some crustaceans are used as human food, like crabs, crayfish, and lobsters. Ecologically, crustaceans are important as primary consumers in aquatic ecosystems. Next is class Chilopoda. This class comprises of the centipedes and have the following general characteristics. The body is dorsoventrally flattened. This body is divided into 2 parts, the head and the trunk. The body consists of up to 15 or even more segments. Each segment has a pair of walking legs. The head has a pair of simple eyes. It also has a pair of antennae. They have poisonous claws on the head, which secrete a poisonous substance. Gaseous exchange in chilopods occurs through the tracheal system, and the sexes are separate. Centipedes are carnivorous and terrestrial, mainly living in moist places. They are common in ant hills where they feed on the ant larvae. Class Diplopoda. This class comprises of the millipedes and have the following general characteristics. The members of this class have a cylindrical body. Diplopods have 3 body parts: the head, a short thorax consisting of 4 segments, and a body trunk. The body is divided into between 9 and 100 segments. Each segment has a pair of walking legs except the first thoracic segment. The head has a pair of short antennae and mandibles. They have 2 clumps of many simple eyes. Each body segment has a pair of spiracles for breathing. Millipedes have no poisonous claws. Next is class Arachnida, and this class includes the spiders, scorpions, ticks, and mites. The body is divided into 2 parts, that's the cephalothorax and the abdomen. The cephalothorax consists of the fused head and the thorax. The ventral side of the cephalothorax has 2 chelicerae, each having a claw-like structure which produces a poison that paralyzes its prey. The cephalothorax has 4 pairs of walking legs, each having 7 joints. Each leg ends in a toothed claw. Arachnids have no antennae. They have a pair of pedipalps which are short jointed and look like legs. The pedipalps are sensitive to touch. In some arachnids, they squeeze and chew food. In mites, the tips of the pedipalps become specialized containers for transfer of sperms. The cephalothorax commonly has 8 simple eyes. Most arachnids have lung beaks for gaseous exchange. In some, gill beaks or tracheal systems are used. Members of Arachnida are carnivorous and are able to paralyze prey using the poisonous claws. The spider is a representative of this class Arachnida. Finally, the class Insecta. Now, insects form half of the population of animals on the earth. They occupy all habitats, be it in air, water, and land, and in all climatic regions of the earth. Their food is varied, ranging from plant tissues, fluids of animals, dead animals, and excretions of animals. Insects have the following general characteristics. The insect body is divided into three parts: the head, thorax, and abdomen. The thorax is made up of three segments with 3 pairs of legs. Some insects have 1 or 2 pairs of wings on the thorax. The head has 1 pair of antennae. The head has a pair of compound eyes and several simple eyes. The mouth parts consist of the mandibles, maxillae, and the labia. The mouth parts are modified according to their feeding habits, like chewing and sucking. The abdomen is made up of 11 or fewer segments with terminal parts modified for reproduction. Gaseous exchange in insects is through the tracheal system. Insects undergo complete or incomplete metamorphosis, and excretion is through Malpighian tubules, which remove uric acid. So much for phylum Arthropoda. We now look at the phylum Chordata. And this phylum comprises of the fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. The term chordata was derived from the term notochord. A notochord is a long, flexible, rod-like structure found in all chordates. In some members, this structure persists even in adulthood. In vertebrates, these exist only in the embryonic stages of development. It is replaced by a vertebral column in later stages of embryology. Chordates inhabit the aquatic and terrestrial environments. The aquatic ones are found in both marine and freshwater environments. Among the terrestrial ones, some are arboreal, that is, living in trees, while others are burrowers. The main characteristics of members of the phylum Chordata include the following. Chordates have a notochord at least at some stage of their development. This is found on the dorsal side of the body. Chordates are bilaterally symmetrical. They have a single dorsal tubular nerve cord. In higher chordates, it develops into brain anteriorly and the spinal cord posteriorly. The spinal cord is enclosed in the vertebral column. They have visceral clefts, that is, slits perforating the body walls at the pharynx. In fishes, these slits become gills. In higher chordates, slits are only present in the embryo. The heart is ventrally located. The blood flows to the heart through veins that are ventrally placed. It flows from the heart through the dorsally placed arteries. Chordates have a closed circulatory system. They have segmented muscle blocks that are called myotomes on either side of the body. Chordates possess a postanal tail, although a rudimentary one exists in some. They also possess an internal skeleton. The main classes of phylum Chordata are Pisces, Amphibia, Reptilia, Aves, and Mammalia. Class Species. Now these are the fishes. A number of fishes have a skeleton made up of cartilage, like in shark, while others such as tilapia have a skeleton made up of bone. Other examples include catfish, Nile perch, lungfish, rayfish, and the dogfish. General characteristics. Fishes have gills for gaseous exchange in water. Movement is by means of fins. Their bodies are covered by scales and they have a streamlined body. They possess a lateral line system for sensitivity. Their heart consists of two main chambers, the auricle and ventricle, with a single closed circulatory system. The body temperature changes according to the temperature of the environment that they are in. They are called ectothermic or poikilothermic. The eyes of the pisces are covered by an nictitating membrane. The tilapia is a representative of the class Pisces. Next is class Amphibia, and these include the newts, salamanders, frogs, and toads. They are partly aquatic and partly terrestrial. General features: the amphibians have four well-developed limbs. The hind limbs are longer and more muscular than the forelimbs. The limbs can be used for movement on land and swimming in water. They have a double circulatory system, that is, the blood passes through the heart twice in a complete circuit through the body. They have a three-chambered heart with two atria and only one ventricle. They breathe in water and fertilization is external. Gaseous exchange in amphibians occur through the skin, gills, and the lungs. They have two eyes and an eardrum behind the eyes. They are ectothermic. The toad is the most advanced of all the amphibians. It stays longer on the dry land than in water. The skin of the toad is less moist and it therefore uses the lungs more than the skin for gaseous exchange. Toads can withstand dry conditions. They stay mainly on the land and return to the ponds for reproduction. The frog is a representative of the class Amphibia. Next, class Reptilia. Reptiles are more adapted to the terrestrial life than the amphibians. However, some reptiles are adapted to aquatic life. The common reptiles include the turtles and tortoise. The turtles are mainly aquatic, while tortoise live successfully on dry land. Other common reptiles include the snakes, crocodiles, lizards, and the chameleon. General characteristics: the body of reptiles is covered with a dry, scaly skin which reduces desiccation or loss of water. Some have no limbs like the snakes, while others do have four limbs like the chameleons and the crocodiles. Fertilization in reptiles is internal and they lay eggs which are covered with a leathery shell which reduces desiccation. The eggs are usually buried in the soil and have stored yolk. Some reptiles, for example, a certain species of chameleon, retain fertilized eggs within the oviduct and give birth to live young ones. They have a double circulatory system. The heart has three chambers with two atria and a partially divided ventricle. However, the crocodiles have a four-chambered heart. Reptiles have well-developed lungs for gaseous exchange, eliminating the need to use the skin or the mouth for gaseous exchange, and they are ectotherms. Next is class Aves. Class Aves comprises the birds. Common birds include the chicken, dove, weaverbird, hawks, eagles, turkeys, goose, and so many others. They are terrestrial and arboreal, while some have adopted an aquatic life. General characteristics: the bodies of birds are covered with feathers for insulation and flight. They have beaks. They have hollow bones. The sternum is enlarged to form a keel for attachment of flight muscles. The hind limbs are for walking or swimming. The forelimbs are modified into wings for flight. However, some birds cannot fly, like the ostrich and the emu. The hind limbs have scaly skin. they have a double circulatory system with a 4-chambered heart which has 2 atria and 2 ventricles. The systemic arc of the circulatory system is on the right. They have lungs for gaseous exchange. They have air sacs which store air. The air in the sacs helps in lowering the body density for flight. They are endothermic. Fertilization is internal and they lay yolky eggs with calcareous shells. They have an internal auditory meters. Finally, class Mammalia, and this is probably the most advanced and complex class of living organisms. These animals inhabit various habitats. Some are arboreal, for example the tree squirrel and some monkeys. Others are terrestrial like man. Some of the terrestrial ones live on the surface of the land while others live in tunnels. There are also some animals which are aquatic, such as the dolphins and the whales. They have fins and a streamlined body. Characteristics of mammals. Mammals have mammary glands, hence the name Mammalia. Their body is usually covered with fur or hair. Their teeth have been differentiated into 4 different types in relation to the feeding habits. This is called heterodont dentition. They have 2 pinnae, that is the external ear. They usually have sweat glands. They have lungs for gaseous exchange. They have a double closed circulatory system with a 4-chambered heart. Their systemic arc is on the left. They have 4 limbs. They have a diaphragm which separates the body cavity into thoracic and abdominal cavities. Their brain is highly developed. They have 7 cervical bones on the neck. They are endothermic. Although most mammals give birth to live young ones, some are egg-laying like the dark-billed platypus. After hatching, the young ones are fed on milk from the mammary glands of the mother. The dark-billed platypus is a representative of the egg-laying mammals. The kangaroo is a representative of a poached mammal. The bat is a representative of a flying mammal. The dolphin is a swimmer with flippers. And of course, we have the humans. Quite frankly, this survey is by no means exhaustive, and a lot has yet to be learned to appreciate the ideas of phylogenetic classification based on biological characteristics. The more biological information is learned, the more the characteristics used become clear. Large number of organisms are still being found. Sometimes an organism may be found which has not yet been encountered by any other investigator before. The investigator may therefore spend a lot of time finding out which organism it is. Fortunately, taxonomists have devised a way of finding out where the unknown organism can be classified. They have constructed keys which use phylogenetic characteristics to place organisms in various categories. The most common identification key is the dichotomous key. Identification is the recognition of characteristics of organisms and the application of the name to a certain organism with these particular characteristics. Now, a dichotomous key is a biological tool for identifying unknown organisms up to certain taxonomic level. The word dichotomous means separating or branching into 2. The key is constructed as a series of couplets, each consisting of 2 contrasting statements describing characteristics of particular organism or groups of organisms. A choice between the 2 statements is made that best fits the organism in question. By reading the 2 statements of each couplet or pair, you progress through the key from typically broad characteristics to narrow and more specific characteristics until only a single choice remains. This last single choice gives the identity of the unknown organism. In constructing the dichotomous key, Morphological characteristics are used as far as possible. For example, simple or compound leaf, the venation type, be it parallel or the net veined. Now, the major characteristics are started with and place the organism into two large groups, and then we proceed to our lesser variations that would separate the organisms further into smaller groups. A single characteristic is selected at a time and identified by a number, for example, a type of leaf or the type of venation. The type of words to be used must be identical and contrasting two statements. For example, simple leaf, compound leaf, leaf net veined, leaf parallel veined, and so forth. And the statements should also be written in positive forms unless it is completely unavoidable to use the negative forms. Now, next is a presentation of some of the key features to look for in plants while constructing the dichotomous key.
Without many of these discoveries and inventions, few of us would be alive today. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 greatest medical breakthroughs in history. Number 10. In vitro fertilization. Kicking off our list is the medical advancement that permanently altered the landscape of reproductive medicine in the late 1970s. That was when British physiologist Robert G. Edwards developed the method by which eggs are fertilized by sperm inside a laboratory and subsequently transferred to a woman's uterus. As a result, he helped thousands of infertile individuals conceive children successfully.